What up, everybody? I'm back with another video on Deleuze. So, continuing with Jules Deleuze, before we delve into the text 1000 Plateaus in the next video, there is a section at the end of Difference and Repetition that is worth touching on, and that is the section concerned with the idea or the concept. The main thing to emphasize here is that Deleuze sees ideas as multiplicities of differential relations. The idea to Deleuze has been so overcoded by capitalism and advertising in the modern era that critique itself has been replaced with a sort of sales promotion. So, Deleuze gives a lot of attention to restoring the idea, or the concept. So, moreover, to Deleuze, a concept doesn't stand as a single, distinct thing, but is an assemblage of things. They must retain a coherency of ideas that create a world, or a face, a mask, but yet can produce discernible parts that make up the singular concepts we talk about. Imagine a spider web that, when one idea in the web is touched, the other ideas vibrate through their relationship to each other along the web. Of course, the deconstructivist angle comes in when you think of how concepts are explained or said to be true. Each concept is explained in reference to another, but none of them are transcendent. There is never an ontological bedrock we build our concepts on top of. It's just this infinite regression by which even God must be explained by other signs and signifieds, other words and concepts. And it should also be clarified that Deleuze makes a distinction between the concept and a proposition. Rather, concepts are intensive and express the virtual existence of an event in thought. Descartes' notion of the cogito, the I think, therefore I am, this itself expresses the virtual or abstract individual in relation to the world, which is infinite space. It is the subject-object dichotomy, but it is also the intensive expression of an event in thinking. So as it is suspected, the concept isn't about truth. It isn't about the agreement between the intellect and an external thing. This is the dogmatic image of thought discussed during the last video. Instead, the concept is a form or a force, and the theory of differences that produces the new that we had discussed in the last video also is built into the structure of every idea, and then ideas are incarnated into the physical world. And that last sentence, ideas are incarnated into the physical world, this is where you can see Deleuze comes out of the materialist tradition and not that of the idealists. Ideas to Deleuze make everything in the physical world possible. Everything is the incarnation of the idea. Of course, to Deleuze, ideas are virtual and separate from the physical world, but they are no less real. Ideas exist as bundles of multiplicities and are actualized and structuralized into the physical world. So to Deleuze, the world is comprised of three parts: the virtual, the intensive, and the extensive. Starting with the extensive, this describes the world as it is, the forms that have come into being, the primary qualities of the world, the ideas that have already structuralized themselves from the virtual into the spatial and temporal world. This is extensivity. But before they are extensive, they are first intensive. The intensive is concealed by the extensive, or the primary qualities of the world, and now the primary difference between the two is that the extensive is that which you can divide, grasp, cut, but intensities are different and cannot be divided, grasped, and so on. Examples of intensivities would be temperature or speed. For Deleuze, changes are only possible if all substances are partly intensive, so the intensive is necessary in explaining how ideas incarnate themselves into the world, or in other words, the old notion of becoming to Deleuze is a movement along different forms of intensity. There are these non-physical virtualities like temperature and speed that make the physical world possible. And as we alluded to in the last video, the process by which forms are brought into being from ideas is called differentiation, but it is differentiation with a C, and it is spelt with a C because the virtual is made physical via difference, and difference here refers not to diversity but intensities. The differentiating of ideas that may actually not be separate or unique from each other. Concepts are not defined by the relationship to an external ideal, but by the internal differences within themselves. The world is nothing more than a swarm of appearances and concepts which join together in assemblages to create our reality. And in the realm of pop culture, this is kind of reflected in my channel art even, or the greater style of vaporwave, as well as a lot of the art produced in the postmodern era that seeks to avoid being an image of thought, the idea we discussed in the last video on Deleuze, and instead these types of artworks are concerned with creating uniqueness from splitting existing ideas and creating new from internal differences. Symbols and signs are not a veil of representation connected to some external thing, but instead, removing the veil just leaves you with another veil. Concepts are intensities along an assemblage. So you can see the world as assemblages becomes clearer with the emergence of technology and medicine. Before, the body was seen as an absolute, a totality. Hegel saw the body or the organism as a totality that's parts defined one another and were completely integrated with each other, as to be unable to be decomposed. But today, even the heart can be removed and replaced with machines, other people's hearts, and even animal hearts. This is to say, the body isn't a totality, but an assemblage. And if we carry this over to the social world, to culture, to politics, and so on, this notion that the world doesn't produce linearly from an ontological bedrock, but are instead assemblages of multiplicities. We begin to see social organizations as messy things. They aren't these absolute structures where you have the state built on its social contract from the order of spontaneous individuals who have inherited their nature from God. Instead, it is a bundle of heterogeneous things that cause it to ebb and flow. They aren't connected by necessity, but are subject to chance. You can take any social structure such as community. There is the materiality, the city infrastructure, how closely situated neighbors are, the church that produces the social cohesion between people within the materiality. You have the bars and the social settings that do something similar. Then the people within it have particular social abilities and behaviors that signal to others that they are participant in the social scene, the way they speak, what to say. It is these interactions that give the community properties of their own. So you can see these are assemblages of which the social structure is a particular intensity of, like a plateau. Now, where do these assemblages come from? How does the world segment itself? Are there eternal segmented forms? What are the conditions for something to be an assemblage? Well, these are all the concepts explored in 1,000 Plateaus that we will get to in the next video. But for now, guys, that's going to have to do it. This is a part of this series I'm doing on Deleuze. And if you liked this, feel free to hit up my social media, give me a follow on Twitter, on Instagram. If you really liked it, you can go over to my Patreon, because that always helps out. Even just $1 means a lot. But yeah, guys, I'll catch you later. There'll be a live stream coming soon as well after I've culminated this series discussing some of the ideas. So have a good one.